There we go.
This meeting is being recorded.
In case you didn't know. All right, welcome everybody and hello. I'm Helen Dulac, Public Education Manager for the North Texas Municipal Water District. The North Texas Municipal Water District is a water, wastewater, and solid waste service provider. We provide water to 2 million people in 10 counties in North Texas. We are all thankful for the recent rains. The recent weather reminded me of this quote: "Texas is a land of perennial drought broken by the occasional devastating flood." This is very true this month. Just a week ago, we were experiencing drought-like conditions and record water demands, mainly due to outdoor watering. For the summer, NTMWD teamed up with Texas A&M AgriLife on this series for virtual classes to help you have a healthy landscape while using our most precious resource wisely. As a thank you, we're having a native plant giveaway. If you want to be entered into the drawing, please send me your email address through the chat messenger. I'll share more details about the plant giveaway in the chat and at the end of the session. Information on the giveaway and all of the classes in the series is available at ntmwd.com/classes. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the NTMWD YouTube page. Out of respect for our presenter, please keep your microphones muted and your video off to conserve bandwidth. Our speaker is looking forward to answering your questions, so please type those in the chat. It is my pleasure to introduce Dean Micello, who is an Extension Program Specialist too with the Urban Wish team. In his role, Dean combines his expertise in water conservation and passion for the environment to build sustainable extension programs that support the Texas A&M AgriLife mission while delivering research-based, locally relevant, and beneficial programming to promote the protection of Texas's natural resources. Dean has close to 20 years of experience working with water conservation program development, management, and implementation of some of the most active organizations in Texas. We are very fortunate to have Dean with us today, so let's get started.
All right. Thank you, Helen. Can you hear me okay? Is everything look good on your end?
Everything is perfect, Dean.
Great. Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for spending your lunch with us. And hopefully everybody is safe from the heavy rains that we saw in the Dallas area. But sure was a wonderful sight to see that rain coming down. And I don't know about you guys, but I was getting a little bit nervous because they continued to report rain and the forecast kept pushing it out farther and farther and farther. And I was like, oh man, it's going to be another time where it just all dissipates and we don't get anything. But that wasn't the case. We got plenty of rain. So everything is nice and wet and saturated out there, but certainly I don't think we're out of the drought woods yet. So we still need to be mindful of our water use. And what we are going to talk about today is we're going to talk about 3 features for your irrigation controller that will help you maximize your water efficiency. So what we are looking for is we're looking for a way to protect our plants and our turf grass from being absolutely decimated by drought conditions, right? So and really the bottom line of that is getting some good deep rooting and some good watering coverage. So we're going to talk about a few ways and a few features on your controller that you may or may not know exist, or you may kind of know they're there but didn't really know what they were. We're going to go through those, and hopefully at the end you'll have a pretty good handle on your irrigation controller and some things that that you can do to get a little bit better at watering. So let's see if I can get this thing to change slides. There we go. All right. So like I said, we are still under drought conditions. This is kind of the summer drought outlook. And I just kind of want to set the stage for where we are and where we're going a little bit. And some of this may be a little bit of doom and gloom, but and that I apologize with. Just look outside and look at the water dripping off of the leaves, and you'll get a nice smile. But no secret, we're in some pretty significant drought conditions. We have been for a while, and the summer outlook shows that these drought conditions are actually going to continue, or going to be, or what they call persistent, into the fall. When we look at the drought monitor, right, which is kind of the predictor of drought conditions, or not really the predictor, I guess it is the model of drought conditions. They're looking at soil temperature and moisture in the atmosphere, and they're coming up with these actual models for drought. And you can see we're sitting right there in either the D3 or D4 extreme and exceptional drought condition area here in the Metroplex. And these monitors come out every week, and the next one won't be released until Thursday. So this is the most current one that I have at this point. So, but it will change with the rains that we have. There will be some relief, but I think for the most part, we're still going to be under some pretty significant drought conditions. And if you look at the map to the left, which was last year at this same time, we hardly had any drought conditions. So you could see how quickly this stuff gains on us. But when we're in these drought conditions, all of our plant material suffers, right? We have a hard time producing enough water to meet demands. And so what we need to do is we need to be as efficient as we can with our water use, because we're all in this together, right? When we start running out of water supplies, then we all need to chip in to do what we can to conserve supplies. And that's the Texan way, right? This is not new to us, especially those of us that have lived in Texas for a really long time. Some of y'all that are new to Texas, well, welcome, and welcome to drought, and welcome to flood. So all of our droughts historically have been broken by flood events. That's just kind of the way it happens here. But we'll see where we go with this event. So the seasonal weather outlook, right? So we have the temperature outlook there on the map on your left-hand side. That actually has held pretty true, right? We're pretty much above normal on our temperatures. It's been hot. There's no secret about that. But the precipitation outlook, well, that's pretty cool because, right, it's in the white area, which is meteorological terms is called equal chances. In regular layman's terms, it's called, I don't know, right? We'll see what happens. So, and of course, we saw some rainfall, and hopefully that's not the end of it. Hopefully we continue to get some good normalized precipitation throughout the rest of this summer to carry us into fall when we start getting some cooler temperatures. So the Texas Reservoir List, right? Or this is a website, the Texas Water Development Board has a site called Water Data for Texas. And well, this is not the latest map, but this one is from yesterday. And this shows the percentage of levels of water in all of our reservoirs around the state of Texas. And as of the 22nd, we were 68.8% full. Now, I did check this morning, and I thought I uploaded the appropriate map, but I guess not. Maybe I missed hitting the save button or something. But the recent rainfalls have brought us up to 69.6%, which that's pretty good. That's almost a percentage point increase. And we'll take every little bit that we can get. But I just want to show you that we're not really out of the woods. I mean, we've taken a pretty good hit as far as our water storage comes from. And as pretty much everybody knows, right, all of our water comes from man-made lakes. in the state of Texas. So we have a lot of evaporative losses when it gets really hot. And actually, evaporative loss off of a lake can be higher than what the actual usage demand is off of the lake. So we want to keep that in mind, and we do tend to lose quite a bit of water during the summertime when it gets hot. So no surprise here. These are just a couple of little snapshots I grabbed off of the internet of folks that are going into watering restrictions around the state. So San Antonio water system in stage 2, stage 1 over in Houston, stage 1 in Austin, Georgetown going into restrictions, city of Irving going into restrictions. And some of it is not necessarily supply driven, but some of it is demand driven, right? Everybody wants two things when it's hot outside. They want air conditioning and they want water, right? So that causes quite a bit of demand to go up. This is another really cool website. If y'all aren't familiar with it, it is CocoRa's. It is the Community Collective Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. And this is a series of gauges that people have all over the United States, and they report precipitation levels daily. So this is grabbed after the rains that we had recently. And you can see in that Dallas area, kind of in the center of Dallas, you see those 9-inch rainfalls, those 5-inch rainfalls. But up in the Collin County area, not quite as much, right? Some of those rainfalls were pretty low when you get up to the upper parts of that county or out west even. But all in all, a pretty good dumping for a lot of people. So we really did us a lot of good for our plant material, green up our lawn, and just kind of give us all a little bit of a breather, just a little bit of a breath, that kind of, oh, finally rain, we finally got it, right? So, and there might have been some of these folks out there, right? So the guy out there watering his grass, and then it starts raining, and he goes and gets an umbrella to keep himself dry while he's watering his plant. This kind of holds true because sometimes we don't know how much rain we're going to get, right? We can, the skies can well up and we can just get barely even a trace of rain, or sometimes we'll get 9 inches, right? It's just very variable, and sometimes the showers are very isolated. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit of why this is an important topic for us, okay? And mostly what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about kind of your standard irrigation controller. We're not really going to dive into the world of ultra smart controllers, which a lot of these features are available on those controllers as well. And it's probably a topic for another day, but the ultra smart controllers haven't really been proven to save a whole lot of water necessarily, and really everything, it's basically human driven at this point, right? You're still in control of this device and what it does, and it does whatever you ask it to. So having control of your controller, so to speak, is going to be our best asset to watering smartly, watering efficiently, and conserving water at the same time. So what I really want to talk to you guys about today is 3 features on your controller that are going to help you probably not avoid leaks and broken heads, but gonna help you be really efficient with your water use. One of the things that we're looking for, especially with turf grass, is drought avoidance, right? We want that grass to be able to either sustain a long period of time of drought, right? So we have warm season turf grasses here, and one of their defense mechanisms when it gets hot and dry is to go brown, okay? It's not dying, it's not dead, it's just going dormant, just like it does in the wintertime, just from lack of moisture. So just keep in mind, brown is beautiful as well, and you don't need to just keep dumping water on it because it could be a little bit wasteful. but there's still activity going on in the roots. There's in the soil. There's still stuff going on there. So when the rains come or when we start watering regularly again, then that grass is going to rebound. It's gonna green right back up for you. So no need to worry, no need to panic on that. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips that are going to help you be able to get to that point to where you know you're getting good, deep, efficient watering, right? And that's what we want, right? We want efficiency. Okay. Now, when we water, right, we want that to be as even as possible across the yard. So we want to look at things with our sprinkler heads, like head-to-head coverage or appropriate sprinkler heads. We don't want to mix devices. We want everything to be as equal as possible. Okay. So there's terms like precipitation rate and distribution uniformity. So what we really need is we need to have the coverage and we need to have the right amount of water coming out at the same time. But not only that, right, we need to get the water down deep into the plant roots, okay, because that's where the magic happens, right? So we need to get the water down deep. We typically have clay soils in our area, and actually black Houston clay, I believe it is called, is really kind of the state soil of Texas. And that's mostly what we deal with. And infiltration rate on clay soil is about half an inch, or quarter of an inch an hour, right? That's really, really slow. It takes a long time to get water down deep into the soil, down into that kind of 6-inch range where we need to be with for our roots on our turf grass, right? So let's kind of talk about some ways that we can kind of make that happen, right? So these are the 3 things we're going to talk about on our controllers. We're going to talk about the program control, the program function, okay? Some of y'all may have seen this on your controller, may not really know what it does. It's a little vague, but we're going to talk about that, right? Then we're going to talk about multiple start times, okay? This is going to be really important because this is how we're going to be able to push the water down deep into the clay soil, get it down to that 6-8-inch root zone and drive those roots down deep. That's where we're going to get our drought avoidance for our turf grass and our plants, is that deep rooting. Turf grass generally has a pretty shallow root zone. So we can get that root zone a little bit deeper, but generally it's fairly shallow compared to the trees, evergreen shrubs, perennials. Some of those plants have a much deeper, much more robust root structure. And then we're going to talk about the seasonal adjust feature. So again, this is another thing some of y'all may have seen, may not necessarily understand it, but we're going to talk about that in respect to how we can use that to benefit us to follow weekly watering advice and recommendations. So, and if you have questions along the way, just kind of throw them in the chat. And I don't think I can probably answer them while I'm presenting, but I can certainly address them at the end of the presentation. I'm not really that good of a multitasker where I can kind of type and talk all at the same time. So I'm just going to focus on talking right now. That's about as good as it's going to get for me. So, all right. So almost every controller out there has a program function, okay? And this program function, there's usually 3 of them. It's usually set up as an A, a B, or a C, okay? Now, no matter what you select on your program function, the controller is going to run through all of those programs. You can't just put it on C and expect it to just run C, right? Which you might think, well, what's the point, right? And I'll show you exactly what the point of that is going to be. So this is kind of where the program button is on all of these different controllers. So this one on the bottom left here has like a little lever that you switch back and forth. The other 3 have more of like an electronic type of button where you push it and it scrolls through on a digital screen between the different functions. And like I said, you can't run them independently, okay? But what they're good for is they're good for hydrozoning your property, right? And when I say hydrozoning, I'm talking about watering grouped plants that have similar water needs together, right? So we're going to want to use our functions to separate our irrigation. So we're going to want to keep all of our turf grass zones on one program. We're going to want to keep all of our planted material, plant beds on another zone. And then we're going to use our third program for specialty type of stuff, right? And here I'll show you kind of how that works. So we've got a typical landscape, right? So we've got a little bit of everything here. We've got turf grass, we've got, looks like some specialty plants hanging on those little arbors there. And then we have some sort of perennial and evergreen type of plantings around the perimeter. So how we would want to do that is we'd want to set up program A, right? Will just be the zones that are watering the turf grass, because that's going to have a different water requirement than everything else, right? So your restrictions or your typical watering is going to be no more than 2 days per week. So we'll set up schedule A for the 2 days a week that we're allowed to water, right? So whatever that might be, for me, it's Thursday and Sunday. So I'll set up my A program to meet the watering demand, right, based on my sprinklers that are watering just the turf grass. Because if we're running the same time for our turf grass as we are for our perennial beds or other plants, then we're either giving too much water to something or not enough water to something else, right? Turf grass, generally, as of, unless you were talking about really exotic tropicals, turf grass is going to be the most water intensive plant in the yard, right? So we need to give it the right amount of water, and we're going to want to set that up on a good cycle and soak program, which we'll get to when we talk about start times, right? So basically what we'll do is we'll select program A on our controller and we'll set it up just like we're setting up a watering, but we'll only put in start times for our turf grass zones. Everything else will be off, right? Then we'll set up program B with all of the zones or stations, whatever you want to call them, that are watering our plant beds, right? So these zones you can set them up on a different time to start. You can set them up on a different day to water. You can set it up any way you want to, right? But what we want to do is we want to isolate these, because your turf grass might be 2 days a week, but your plant zones may only be 1 day a week. That might be enough water for them. So they don't necessarily need as much as the turf grass. They're going to have deeper root structures, more robust root structures. So we don't need to do it. Or maybe we've got those set up on drip irrigation, right? Where we're talking about gallons per hour rather than gallons per minute. So we might need to water a little bit longer period of time, or we might want to water more days per week. Now, remember, most of the communities around the Metroplex do not restrict watering with drip irrigation. It's pretty much just overhead spray. So if you have drip zones in these areas, you can set up your schedule pretty much however you want. Now, I would still avoid afternoon watering or nighttime watering, still try to get that done in the morning. And then we'll reserve program C for our really specialty stuff. Say we've got some drip tubing or some little micro sprays in some of our pots, or we have a garden, a little vegetable garden that's isolated, so we can set that up on program C to deliver whatever amount of water that we want to do there. So, and it's the same thing for each part. So you would take your controller, you would move your program over to B, and then you would set up your days to water and your run times in there, your start times and your run times. And then you just flip it over to program C. Same thing, set up your days to water and your start times and your run times on there. So then when the controller runs, it's going to cycle through all of those programs, right? But if there is, when it hits program B, if there is no start time associated with a zone, then that zone is not going to come on until that scheduled time, right? So we, and I have some examples that I'll show you here in just a little bit on what that kind of programming looks like. Okay, so might sound a little bit confusing, and hopefully I can bring it all together here at the end for you. All right, so multiple start times. This is where we really need to be looking at for our water infiltration, right? So like I mentioned earlier, clay soil has a really slow infiltration rate. So if you take water like a garden hose and you just dump it down onto some clay soil, or if you dump it down onto some sandy soil, right, it's going to absorb super fast into the sandy soil, but it's going to take a minute before it absorbs into the clay soil. It's just really slow. But the benefit there is our clay soil has more water, moisture holding capacity. So we're going to be able to hold moisture longer in our soil. Now, the closer to the surface that moisture is, the more it's going to dry out, or the faster it's going to dry out. The deeper we can get that water down into our clay soil, the more moisture we're going to have available for a longer period of time. So, and that's where our plant roots are going to be, is down in that 6 to 8 inches. And that's why we want to do a cycle and soak program, because we want to put a little bit of water on and push it down in, and then put a little bit of more water on. So some common mistakes when setting up multiple start times is we can get confused with what is a runtime and what is a start time. So you end up having all these different start times programmed in, and you start getting stacking, like stacked on top of each other. And then so your system will pretty much just consistently run, because it doesn't have any idea what to do, right? You've got too many start times stacked on top of each other, and it's not allowing the system to cycle through all of its stations. The next one is not allowing enough time between start times, right? So you've got to allow enough time for your first set of stations to run under your first start time before your second start time starts. So, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And then also not reducing your minutes for each of your start times, right? So if you are watering for 30 minutes total, right, that's how much you want to water total, right? You wouldn't water 30 minutes for each start time. You would break that up into 3 10-minute run times, right? So you would start at like 1 a.m. and you would run for 10 minutes, and then you would let it sit for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then the next start time will come on for another 10 minutes, and then you'll let it sit, let that water soak down into the soil, and then your last third start time will start and go for another 10 minutes, right? So it'll give you a total of 30 minutes of watering, just not doing it all at one time. So the key is deep and infrequent, right? That's what we want. Look at that root structure there on the deep and infrequent. And that's what we're going to get with our cycle and soak. We're going to allow that water to penetrate the clay soil, push down a little bit into the soil. Then we're going to put some more water on. And that's going to help push that water down just a little bit deeper. And then we'll put maybe a little bit more on if we're doing 3 start times, and push that water down. So generally with a clay soil, whether you have a slope or whether you're flat, I would always recommend doing at least 2 start times. If you have a slope, maybe 3, maybe 4 start times, right? So here it is, cycle and soak. We want to let it run, and then we want to let it soak in for a little bit, and then we want to let it to run again. So a good 30 to 60 minutes, I say, in between cycles, just let that water push down into the soil really good. We're going to reduce runoff when we do a cycle and soak program too, so we're going to reduce waste at that point, which is also really important. So, all right, so here's my ugly old controller in my garage, and you see it's dirty. It's got mud all over it, because that's generally when you're fixing something your hands are all nasty. You got to go back to the controller. You got to like flip some stuff around. But here's how we're going to do it. We're going to put the switch on start times, right? We're going to, and you can see we're in program A here on the controller, and we got our first start time. We're going to start at 1 a.m. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to add up all of our stations. Okay. So I have 7 stations that run, right? And I'm going to say they run, when they go through all their stations, they run for 30 minutes. Okay. So what I know is I know it's going to cycle through all of those stations in 30 minutes. So my next start time, and then it's got to be at least 30 minutes after it runs, but then I want to let it soak in for at least another 30 minutes or so. So my second start time is not going to be until 2:30. I'm going to give it plenty of time for that first cycle to go through, and then it's going to sit and it's going to wait. And then at 2:30, the sprinkler system is going to start again, and it's going to run through all of those cycles on program A again, right? And it's going to sit and wait till my third start time, right? And I have a slope on my front yard, so I do 3 start times, right? And then my third one is going to start at 4 a.m. And that's going to be it. It's going to run through that cycle, and then it's going to shut off, right? So, but most controllers are going to have at least 4 start times, right? So, but we really reserve that 4th start time for like those extreme conditions. Like, look at these 2 pictures here down on the bottom. I mean, that is a pretty good slope, right? And somehow they're managing to keep that grass watered. Water is just going to run downhill. So you got to put a little bit on at a time and kind of soak it in. Same with the one on the left there. Some pretty good slopes, a lot of plant material there. So you want to get a little bit of water on at a time and let it soak in. A little bit more and let it soak in. Right? So, so that's kind of how we're going to set up our start times. And I think, let's see. Okay. All right. Here we go. I have my controller card here, and of course it's sloppy, and I have a little animation of a little arrow thing going on there, but is that going to pop up? No, it's not. So, okay, never mind that. So you can see how I have it set up, and you may have to squint and get really close to the screen and look at it, because this is about good of a shot as I could get. But you can see program A, right? I've got it running on Thursdays and Sundays, and you can see my run times on A, right? You can see I've got a 9-minute, 12-minute, 15-minute, and 4 minutes, right? So those are each going to run 3 times. And you can see my watering times, my start times there, right? Which are different than what I just showed before, because I didn't actually change my card, because I wrote it in ink, not in pencil. So always make sure that you use pencil, or you have extra cards that you do. So when you make a change, you actually know what the change was that you made, and you can keep track of all that, right? And then you can see program B, right, is drip zones. Those are my drip zones that are in my backyard, right? So I've got those running on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? And then I've got a couple of more zones on C, and I only have those running on Saturday. That is it. Those are like some specialty kind of areas that don't necessarily need a whole lot of water. Also drip zone. So you can kind of see how it's set up. You can kind of get an idea of how it's all put together now, right? So I see a question talking about run times, and we will kind of address that here in just a couple of minutes, actually. So good, timely question. All right. So, and here's where we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it here with the seasonal adjust feature, right? So this is kind of one of those things where I guess every controller is a little bit different with the seasonal adjust, but generally what it does is it just reduces the amount of time that the sprinkler system runs, but doesn't actually change your schedule. Okay. So So, and we'll get into how kind of to make all of this work and try to make it make sense. But it's a real easy way to change how much water you're applying without really having to go in and reprogram everything, right? We just need to reprogram it the right way based on the front end. So everything that we talk about, when we talk about turf grass watering, and there's this term thrown out, this 1 inch per week, it's kind of this like term that's tossed out there. That is just sort of a general, how much water does our turf grass need to survive and thrive in our environment, right? And this is based on scientific data, which is derived from evapotranspiration. So we have evaporation, which is the loss of moisture from the Earth's surface. And then we have transpiration, which is the loss of moisture through the plant leaves, okay? So, or through its stomata, right? And this is all based on pretty much just few weather conditions, right? Wind, solar radiation or heat, and rainfall and humidity. So we've kind of got these things all put together in here, and this is how we actually come up with evapotranspiration, and we come up with how much water do we really need to water, right? So, and there's a bunch of sciencey stuff in here. We use a bunch of weather stations, and we use this big calculation called the Penman-Monteith equation, which seems to be the best for our area. And then we come up with a reference ETO, or a crop coefficient. And this little device here in this picture is called a lysimeter. So we're measuring how much moisture is in the soil and how much that weighs. And then as that gets lighter and lighter, then we know we're losing X amount of moisture out of the soil. So we kind of know how much water we need to replace back into that soil, right? So, so this is kind of how we establish all that. And I just give this to you just as a frame of reference, so you kind of know where we're going with the whole how to use the seasonal adjust and why we have watering recommendations that we do, okay? So WaterMyYard.org. Okay, most people in the North Texas Municipal Water District service area have access to this program. And this is a weekly watering advice program. So essentially what they're doing is when you sign up for this program, which should be free for you guys, you're going to put in some information. You're going to put in some information, essentially, like what are you watering, right? Turf grass. I'm watering a warm season turf grass. And then, you know, or I've got perennial beds, I've got a slope, I've got this kind of sprinkler system, I've got that kind of sprinkler system. So maybe a little bit of homework that you have to do on the front end. You have to do a couple of things to figure it out. But once you get it all set up, right, they're going to use that information that we just went through. They're going to use that evapotranspiration information. They're going to use daily rainfall rates or weekly rainfall amounts and your plant coefficient, and they're going to give you a watering recommendation, right? And I think I have a couple of those here coming up to show you kind of what that looks like. So when we talk about average weekly watering requirement for turf grass, you can see there's a number of times during the year when we don't really have any requirement whatsoever in the DFW area. We're just going to run that manually. May, we're going to be at 80% of what the requirement is. June, we're going to be at 1 inch. Is, you know, July, August, 1 inch, September, October, we're going to start going back down again, right? So you see that bell curve of what our actual watering season is. So when we talk about half an inch or 1 inch of water, you're like, I don't know how much that is. I run my system for 10 minutes, right? So there's different ways that we can figure out exactly how much water we're applying to our grass. And I'm pretty sure I have a slide on that. And if I don't, I'll talk about it here in a minute. we can do like a catch can test. We can just read gallons in the meter. We can look at our actual manufacturer specs of our equipment. There's a few different ways to do it, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I also wanted to share this, which is the Texas ET network, which is developed and managed by the same people who do WaterMyYard.org. Sorry, it's going to be weird. I'm going to move myself over here, so I'm not blocking that. So if you're not in a WaterMyYard.org area, you can still sign up for weekly watering advice through the Texas ET network, right? You just kind of log into your profile and set it up. So this one here is for my location, which is the closest weather station to me is the Louisville station. It gives you a 7-day watering summary. It gives you kind of your evapotranspiration loss. It gives you your maximum temperatures, and it gives you your rainfall, right? Which wasn't a whole lot during that week. So, so the watering requirement, you see that on the second line there on the top, it says water requirements 0.99 inches. So almost a full inch of water for the week. So we're looking at the week prior, right? How much water did our plants lose through transpiration the week prior, right? And of course, no rainfall, so there was no replacement really. So we're at a pretty high amount. And of course, I've got my plant coefficient, which is 0.6, and then what we call a stress factor, which is I don't want to replace 100% of what my plant lost, because then it's going to grow too vigorously, right? But I want to keep it looking good, looking healthy. So I can cut that down to about 60%. This is one that just came out today. This is for actually the Dallas Center, where we're located at on Coit Road, right? And we did receive some rain, right? So now look at our watering requirement, 0. We have no watering requirement. We received more than enough rainfall the last week, well, or yesterday, essentially, that we don't need to water our grass anymore, right? So what do we want to do? We want to go and we want to flip that switch on our controller to off. We don't need to water. We're not going to need to water this whole entire week, right? There's going to be no need for it because our temperatures are going to be low, and we're going to keep getting a little bit of rainfall probably throughout the week. So we're good. We get a whole week. We're not going to need to water at all, right? So that is kind of how watering requirements or recommendations, I won't call them requirements, they're really recommendations. We know it says you have to follow this, but it gives you a good guideline on how much you might want to water, especially if we're looking at drought conditions and we're looking at drought avoidance, okay? Here's kind of the equation that they use. These are the quality factors. And you can see on the bottom right, that picture there, we've got turf grass at 100% of water requirement replacement, all the way down to 20% replacement. And you can get down to that 40 or 60%, and your grass still looks okay, right? And 40%, it's struggling a little bit, but 60%, it looks pretty good. So we can definitely get down there a little bit lower on our watering requirement. So the question was asked, how do I know how much water I need to apply? So what we're going to do is we're going to base everything off of this arbitrary 1 inch of watering. So, oh man, my bullet points got all messed up, but you can figure it out here. So one thing we can do is we can do catch cans. So we're going to put catch cans out all over our yard. We're going to use like a tuna can or a coffee can, something that has a flat side, right? If it has a slope side, then there's all kinds of math that goes into, figuring out how wide the opening was and the constriction. So if we have a flat side, then we can just measure that with a ruler. So we're going to put these cans out. We're going to put one close to the head and 1 or 2 in between each heads. We're going to let it run for a certain period of time. We're going to want a stopwatch, and we're going to run it, let's say, for 10 minutes, and then we're going to turn our system off, and we're going to go out there with a ruler, and we're going to measure how much water is in each one of those cans, and we're going to add it up, right? So if we run our system for 10 minutes and we have a ½ inch of water in our can in 10 minutes, right? Then we know if we run it for 20 minutes, right, we're going to get 1 inch of water, right? So we're solid. We know exactly how to program our turf grass areas for 1 inch of water right now, right? The other way we can do it is we can look at the water meter. We can turn on a system or a zone, let it run, right? So we need to record what the meter says before we start the zone, let the zone run, and then turn it off, and then calculate the amount of time that it ran and how many gallons went through that that zone, and then use this formula right here, this precipitation rate formula. This 96.3 is our constant on here. So we're going to multiply that by how many gallons per minute went through your meter. And then you're going to have to do a little bit of work. You're going to need to measure your square footage on your yard, right? So you got to know pretty much where we're at as far as how many square feet. And this is going to give you your precipitation rate. So now you know, right, how much water is applied during that specific measurement of time. Okay, and then you just add the time up to 60 minutes, right, or to 30 minutes, or to whatever it is, so you know exactly how much water you need to water to get that 1 inch, right? Does that make sense? I hope so, because sometimes it's confusing to me, but it's really not rocket science, especially if we do the catch can test. It just takes some time. All right, so here I'm going to move myself again and go over here. All right, sorry about that. I know that's weird. So, okay. All right, so then once we have a precipitation rate, right, now we want to know, okay, how long do I need to water for runtime, right? So I want to know what I need to do. So here's the formula for that, right? So now we know what our precipitation rate is. We know what our water requirement is, which is going to be 1 inch. In this case, we've got our water requirement is ½ an inch, right? So we basically just do the formula. We have a runtime in this scenario of 35 minutes a week, right? So we're going to assume a twice per week schedule. So we're going to divide that by 2. We're going to come up with 18 minutes each time we water. Now we're going to break that down into 3 cycles for our cycle and soak, because we're on a pretty heavy slope here. So now we're going to have 3 cycles at 3 minutes each, right? That's going to be for ½ an inch, right? So if we want to do 1 inch of water, right, each time, then we're going to have to up that, right? So we'll be at 12 minutes for that in that scenario. So pretty simple, pretty easy math, not super complicated, right? But what we want to do, okay, is we want to be careful with our seasonal adjust. We want to make sure that when we're programming our controller, we're programming the seasonal, making sure the seasonal adjust is set at 100%, okay? Because we're going to equate that 100% to 1 inch, right? So we're looking at 1 to 1. So if we program everything for 1 inch 1 inch of water per week for our turf grass, and we have our program or our seasonal adjust set at 100%. Now, if the watering requirement is 50, like ½ an inch, let's say, right? To make the adjustment to meet the watering requirement, all we have to do is adjust our seasonal adjust to 50%, right? If the requirement is ½ of an inch, we just adjust down to 25% or to 20% or 30%, whatever, however your adjustment works to get it close, right? So that's how we can easily and efficiently use the watering requirement, right, without having to go in and reprogram everything, right? So we've set up our system, our program with our cycle and soak. We've got enough time in between cycles that we don't have to worry about that. And now we're set up at 100% on our seasonal adjust. Now we can really follow those watering requirements. We can be efficient, and we're set up for a cycle and soak. So we're pushing the water down deep into our soil, getting that good deep root structure. We want 6 to 8 inches of good solid roots, because that's where our nutrient uptake is going to be. That's where our water uptake is going to be. And that's where we're going to get the best of our drought avoidance right there. So here you go. We just kind of talked about this. So at 100%, we programmed, we're at 1 inch per week. And then if our recommendation is 0.85, then all we got to do is just go down to 85% on our controller. And then that's it. We made the adjustment for the week. It didn't really take a whole lot of time. And we're being super conscious with our water, and we're being super efficient with what we're doing. So I hope that made sense to you guys. I kind of feel like I rushed through that a little bit. There was a lot of information. I just sort of turned on the garden hose for you guys, but that's it. This is my contact information here. So if you have questions, let me move myself out of the way again. Then you can contact me directly. You can also contact, if you're in Collin County, there's a great, you got a great horticulture and a great ag and natural resources agents there in the extension office in Collin County in Brad Voss and Chase Brook. So both of those guys are definitely there to help you guys out. All right. So and that's it. With that, I guess we can answer some questions, Helen.
Thank you, Dean. So we did have, and you kind of addressed it, we did have a question about trying to find out like how much water your system is actually putting out.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned the catch can test. What
Right.
is the best way to use that data to program your system? So if you find out, because you were talking about like the zoning, like your lawn is on zone A, right?
Right.
And your drip is on zone C.
Right.
So what if you have a part of your yard where your lawn is not getting the same amount of water as another part of your lawn?
Right. So if you're talking about, you have mixed zones, so you have sprays in like grass and shrubs. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It could also be, yes, it could be that, because I think a lot of us do have that. We do have, our grass and our shrubs together, but also like if, you realize that your coverage in one area is not as good as a coverage in another area, but they're all on your lawn zone.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so the best way to really do that is, again, using the catch cans, because so even on my yard, I've got tighter spacing, and different spacing on my side yards than I do on my main part of my front yard. So obviously the main part of my front yard, I have longer run times because ultimately I'm trying to get to 1 inch. So you do this the exact same way with the catch cans or with the meter. But what you're doing with the meter is you're looking at the amount of gallons. If you have more spray heads, then obviously you're going to have probably more gallons per minute running through that system. So inevitably you're going to have a lower runtime. So you can, if you're going to do the meter method and read the meter, then just follow that precipitation rate calculation and do it for each individual zone that you have, right? If you have 2 zones in your front yard, but they're really the same, they both have 8 heads and they're all exactly the same, then you can kind of add all that up together into one big zone. But if you have a side yard that's a little bit different design with different spray heads, then you'll definitely want to do that independently of its own.
All right. We also had Annette asked another question. Is it possible to change which sprinkler heads go to which zone?
Yes, you can. So if you open up your controller, there's going to be you have to open up go to the backside of the actual digital face. That should pull open on most controllers. There's going to be a series of wires. They're going to be different colors. They're going to range. It's going to be the rainbow back there of all the different colors. Those different colors represent the different stations or zones in your yard. So say you have 7 stations, right? But you want where 7 is to be the first one that runs, right? Then you would just disconnect 7, the wire from the 7 slot, and move it to the first slot to number 1. And you would take number 1 and move it over to number 7. And that's going to change the timing. So it's just that simple. It's kind of like spark plugs on a car. right? You don't want to mix up the wires because then you don't know which one goes where. So you want to be careful, but each of those wires going into those different stations represent timing as how they start from 1 all the way through 7. So if you want to switch the timing around, then you just switch the wires.
I had no idea. Okay, thank you, Dean.
Yeah.
All right, so Stephen has a couple of questions. One of them
Okay.
is the 1-inch watering recommendation is for grass, but
Okay.
how do you know what to use for other plants and trees? Do
Mhm.
you have a website or someplace that people can reference for watering recommendations for other types of plants?
Yeah, there's a lot of research being done right now on that. And San Antonio Water Systems, a gentleman there by the name of Mark Peterson has done a tremendous amount of work on that. And there, I don't have anything specific that I can point you to. If you want to go and look at San Antonio Water Systems, or it's just saws.org, they have some of that information that you can look up, but generally, so warm season turf grass generally has a coefficient of 0.6. Cool season turf grass generally has a coefficient of 0.8, right? So most of our like woody perennials, let's say like lantanas or skullcaps or some of those type of plants, definitely going to be down in the 0.3 coefficient range, maybe even lower than that. Our evergreen shrubs generally they're water sippers. So if you're looking at like Eopon hollies, or even some of our natives like agarita or cotton ester, those are going to be really, really low. We're going to be down like 0.1 coefficient on some of those. So it's just kind of a general guide, but like I said, there is a lot of research being done on that right now. And I know San Antonio Water System with Mark Peterson and Calvin Finch at one time have done a tremendous amount of work in that area. So hopefully soon we'll be able to dial that in a little bit more precisely.
Absolutely. And so in the meantime, while we're waiting, Dean, could you maybe talk about a more analog way, like maybe using a moisture meter to kind of test, like, if our shrubs and different things need water?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can buy these moisture meters. Sometimes if you attend some of the programs that some of the cities do, the water conservation programs. I know I just did a program yesterday with Annie with City of McKinney. She was giving away moisture meters. They're super simple. I just bought a 2-pack of them off of Amazon for like $8. So and essentially what I do is I take my moisture meter, right? It has a long rod on it, and I put a ruler up to it, and I'll mark off inch marks on that rod. So I know when I push it down into the grass or into the plant bed, however far down I push it, you can see that meter either go to dry or moist on there, right? So you know that, okay, I'm pretty dry in the top 3 inches, but if I go down to 6 inches, which is pretty much the maximum of my measurement wand, then I'm starting to hit moisture. So I know I'm getting water down deep into the plant. Now, don't leave it in your yard, right? Or don't leave it in your plant bed, because it will erode from being in the soil. But definitely keep one handy with you. Keep it in with your garden supplies or whatever. And that's just a great way to kind of test some spots to see if you're getting water deep down into the soil where we want it. Super easy, low tech way to do it. Yeah, great. I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so Phil has a question. Is there a way to manually run one of your programs on your controller? Basically, go through all the zones on the program with one button push. I can only see how to run one zone at a time.
Okay. So some controllers have what's called a test. And you would just select that test feature and then hit run. And it's going to run through all of the zones for whatever is programmed in there. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe a 1-minute test, but that's generally what it's called. It's called like a manual test or a cycle test or something. They all have different names, but it's usually a test feature that's on there. but yeah, and it's kind of a pain to have to walk back and forth, selecting each station and starting it. They do make some controllers that are Wi-Fi compatible, where you just download an app and you can start and stop zones from your cell phone, which is pretty good. I know Hunter and Rainbird and WeatherMatic make some pretty simple ways to set up their little Wi-Fi controllers. They have just a little Wi-Fi module that plugs in to them. So when you just connect it to your house Wi-Fi or your Bluetooth or cellular data even. Yeah.
Wow, everything's getting so smart nowadays. I mean, pretty
Smarter
soon
than
you're going to
us,
be,
but yeah.
yeah, you're going to be able to say, Siri, turn off my sprinkler system or something like that.
There
You know,
you
like if
go.
it starts raining or something like that. Okay,
Right.
so I'm going to ask one more question from Stephen because we are at 1 o'clock. So Dean, I want to thank you so much for your time. I
Yeah.
want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. So
Absolutely.
our last question is, my irrigation guy installed some pop-up heads that just pop up when the drip zone is on, so you know it has pressure. Oh, that's a great tip and is
Yeah.
working.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so that's a big complaint or worry sometimes with drip irrigation, is since it's subsurface, you don't really know when it's using. But these little indicators that he's talking about, when it's running, they pop up. So you know water is moving through the system. They're usually installed at the farthest end of the drip zone, so you know that water is moving through and everything is working really well. They make them where it's like a little head that pops up or a flag or different things, but yeah, it's a drip indicator and those are super handy. I recommend those every time when somebody's wanting to put in drip irrigation. Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you, Stephen, for bringing that up.
Absolutely. All right. So Dean, before we sign off for real, do you have any good reference site for people who are looking for information about watering their foundation?
No, I do not, because that is engineering stuff, and there is very few structural engineers that are really, really going to touch that, because every situation is different. And that's kind of one of the reasons why under some of these community drought contingency plans, drip irrigation and hand watering is not restricted, because there is a lot of drip irrigation being installed for foundation purposes. Myself personally, I think it's ridiculous. I think if we're managing our lawns appropriately and we're managing our landscapes, which are usually around our house appropriately, we're not going to have much of an issue. We can have just as much of an impact negatively on our foundation by overwatering than underwatering. So it's just an area that you're not really going to find anybody to touch, just because it's a really risky place to be. But yeah, generally my thought is, don't worry too much about it. So that's kind of always been my thought. So my house has been here since 1991, and it's doing fine. I've had no issues. So I just don't sweat it too much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dean. I just also want to remind everybody else that our last class is going to be a week from today on August 30th, also at 12 o'clock. It's called Don't Waste a Drop, Drip Irrigation Basics, and Dean will be returning for that.
Yes.
It's going to be an introduction to drip irrigation and also how to do some replacement. So, converting some of your heads to drip irrigation, which is what I am really excited about, because I think that's going to be great for like container gardens, because they dry out so quickly in the summer and the heat, and adding some drip irrigation lines to those is going to be fantastic. So everybody, I want to thank you again so much for your time. Dean, thank you so much for always being a wealth of information. And you can catch these videos, the recordings of these sessions, at the NTMWD YouTube page and also at ntmwd.com/classes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, y'all. All right. Bye.
Bye.